What's up, my dude? Ski Jason Schwartz. You got some nice Schwartz on, bro. I appreciate that membership, big dog. Just letting you guys know, if you want to become a member of the channel, all you got to do is hit the join button on the front page, and I will also leave a link to that down below in the comments. So be sure and go take a look-ski. That is the absolute #1 way to help support my channel. And always big shout-outs to the dooskies out there, you know what I'm saying? You know what it is. So this video is all about these Lucas Oil Pro Motocross 2022 Replica national tracks for MX vs. ATV Legends. Okay, I wanted to go through and kind of review this a little bit, see if it's really worth the money to buy the DLC if you didn't buy any of those, you know, pack editions where these tracks came with it, right? So if you're just buying these puppies outright, we're going to go through here and take a look and kind of see if I think it's really worth it. So what these Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Replica tracks are on Legends, it's basically like if you had an official, you know, milestone Lucas Oil Pro Motocross game. I know a shitload of people have been begging for that forever, especially around the time the first Supercross game came out and the second Supercross game. Everybody was wanting, you know, milestone to make an official Lucas Oil Pro Motocross video game instead of the MXGP games. And funnily enough, bros, that's basically pretty much what Legends is, because it feels so much like the first official Monster Energy Supercross game as far as the ground physics, and then it feels like you just mix that with All Out, right? But then you kind of take the All Out national track design and mix it with like a more one-to-one scaling, more narrow, you know, first official Monster Energy Supercross game vibe type track design. It's really like you not only does it feel like you mixed All Out with the first Supercross game, but even the track designs on these replica tracks and also the Supercross tracks in the game feel like you literally took the track designs from the first Supercross game and then mix that with the track designs of All Out. And that's basically what you get with Legends. So it really does feel like they have tried to do some one-to-one scaling treatment on these tracks. They feel super narrow. Sometimes it feels like it's hard to even keep the bike on the track because of how narrow it is. You know, when it starts getting to that point, you find yourself, you know, flirting with them damn little yellow sticks that stick up out of the ground off the side of the track, right? Off the border of the track, right? Spency boy doesn't know what the fuck to call those things, but, you know, we're gonna roll with it, dog. When you're out there flirting around with those things, like half the time you're going around the track, you know, that's probably a sign she's a little too narrow. Also, weirdly enough, like with how compacted the tracks feel scaling-wise, kind of feels like Redbud, you know, Larocco's Leap is not really as long as it should be or something like that. Feels a little bit short. The way a lot of the corners sweep, it kind of feels like they've just sweep the corners even tighter than one-to-one scaling, and some of the lanes feel like they're even shorter than one-to-one scaling. I don't know if MX vs. ATV had trouble like fitting the whole layout of the track together when they started messing around with the scaling. I don't know if it's just because Legends plays so much different than All Out did that it kind of just feels different. I don't know what it is, but I'm just telling you, especially when you compare it to the other stock motocross tracks on Legends, they're so much less about like jumping and jump rhythms. The Lucas Oil Pro Motocross tracks are way more based around like roughness and ruts, you know, as they should be, but you got to understand it's almost like the scaling is to the point where it feels like these pro motocross tracks, like the scaling of them doesn't even actually really fit the gameplay of the game as good as the stock tracks do. Do you see what I'm saying, bro? You following me, dogs? It's kind of like the stock tracks of Legends, motocross tracks, right? Fit the gameplay and the momentum and the speed feeling of the game better than these Lucas Oil Pro motocross tracks do. Don't get me wrong, you can still get in a fun flow and railing an outside rut, right? Sipping the tea, ripping the throttle, you know what I'm saying? You can definitely do that and have fun on these Lucas Oil Pro motocross tracks, but the point being is they're a lot smaller jumps. You're not going to find yourself really struggling to hit like a certain jump as much as you would on the stock tracks. It doesn't have that, 420-foot jump into a roller section, right? It doesn't really have that type of shit like the stock tracks have. Everything feels smaller on these Lucas Oil Pro motocross tracks. So for some of you that might would have got that thought in your head that it was gonna be like the stock tracks were scaling wise, but reimagined with the Lucas Oil Pro motocross replica track design, but it's still got that little bit bigger scaling that the stock tracks have. Unfortunately for some of you, including me, that were kind of hoping and, envisioning that would be the case for these tracks, they're not really like that. And you got to understand, even though they've got more ruts and roughness than the stock tracks, with the physics of this game and how arcadey the ground physics can be at times, it's not really like the roughness is, super affecting the bike. It's not really as much of that feeling. Some of you guys might would have been expecting these Lucas Oil Pro motocross tracks to be a lot more like digging in these inside ruts or going over this hardcore braking bump, where the bike is bouncing forward and backwards. Of course, I always have to be careful mentioning the word bouncing when we're talking about all out, right? We don't want to bring that shit back, bro. But you got to understand there's something to the physics of Legends where it's like there's just not enough suspension inertia over the roughness. You know what I mean? It's about the only way I know how to explain it. And so when you add more roughness and you add more ruts to the physics of Legends, which is damn near like the first official Monster Energy Supercross game on the ground, it's not exactly what it might seem like, right? Yes, the roughness can still challenge you a little bit more. Yes, having the more ruts, you can still sometimes dig into a rut. I'm not saying you never can, but they got to be pretty big, daddy, and you got to be pretty much already in that rut. It's not just going to totally grab you. You just about already have to be somewhat in it going through the corner, and you're kind of playing that game of like clutch boosting, carrying momentum, but like, I don't know who the hell put NOS on these 252 strokes, bro, but holy shit, for some reason, I've got this 252 stroke feeling like it's faster than the 450 in the game, so yeah, not really sure what's going on there, but this wicked-ass NOSed up 252 stroke definitely is fast enough to feel like you can just ride the bike right off the side of the track when it's got this smaller, more narrow, tight scaling, right? So it's a lot of hitting the brakes, clutch boosting, kind of Villapoto power sliding, and it's got a fun little feeling to it. It does. Even though these tracks I feel like are not quite as fun factor as the stock tracks are in the game, there still is something there. I was just a little bit disappointed that they went so far down that one-to-one scaling road. Especially with Legends still having a somewhat of a fantasy kind of feeling to it, Yeah, it does have some realistic feelings to it, but it also does have some fantasy, damn near mobile arcade motocross games feelings to it. So when you try to get these like more realistic one-to-one scaling, smaller jumps, some of the sections just feel weird. They don't even actually necessarily exactly feel like that full-blown real-life replica track. That's how tight the scaling is on some of these tracks. So, but it's not to say you can't get some fun out of it. I still feel like you can, and you have to remember, with Legends only being like $30-something when it first came out on Steam with that special deal, you know, I kind of look at it like, even if you bought this official, you know, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross DLC for the game, even if you did that, you still haven't spent what a lot of these other AAA video games are out there, just the base versions of them, right? You still haven't even spent that much. So I feel like with MX vs. ATV cutting down the price of the base version of the game, that really does mean a lot in this situation, right? It means everything, because then that opens up that door there for you to spend that money that you didn't spend on the base version of the game on some Lucas Oil Pro Motocross DLC, or even the bike DLC in the game, you know, all the official bikes in the game. Of course, I'm old school. I wish all this shit was just in the base version of the game. One other thing I was kind of scratching my head a little bit about, and some of you guys might run into this issue on some of these tracks as well, like with the Redbud Replica, for instance, it's way more hard packed than I was expecting it to be. And the ruts are a little bit smaller on Redbud. It's almost more like amateur day Redbud than it is like full-blown, you know, hardcore ruts, a little bit softer. You know, if you watch the real life 2022 Redbud race, the dirt was a little bit softer, like they had dug it a little bit deeper. You know, it wasn't quite as dry. I don't know. For some reason, this Redbud Replica for Legends has got a lot more of a dry, super hard, packy kind of vibe to it. So that's just something to keep in mind. You know, every one of these tracks might not perfectly match whatever you saw in that real life replica track of this particular year, even though they are called the 2022 Lucas Oil Pro Motocross tracks, right? But one thing I did notice that was kind of cool was you can get different time of day effects within each of these different replica tracks, so that adds a cool little layer to it. Sometimes you'll hop on like high point, but it's like morning, so you feel like you're on some cool, you know, morning practice vibes, and the shadows over the track play more of an effect when it's got the different time of day effect on the track. You can get more of like a midday, you know, time of day effect. You can get more of like a sunset evening time of day effect. So instead of just having the exact same time of day on every single track, it kind of varies a little bit even within one individual track. And I'm just saying, I like that nice little touch to it. But anyways, I know it may sound like I'm being somewhat negative towards this DLC, but, you know, don't let me lie to you here. I definitely had some fun on these tracks. If you get on the right bike with the right setup and you get to that point where you can really start holding that gas down, it does have a fun little flow feeling to it, right? Almost like a kind of how Reflex has a flow to it. Obviously not the same flow as Reflex, bro. Definitely not that kind of flow, bro. But Legends has some kind of a flow feeling, which is a very good thing. I think we've been missing that in a lot of different, you know, dirt bike games over this past decade. They've not really had that like momentum flow feeling to them. So, you know, depending on what kind of track you're on, if you really start scrubbing that bike low to the ground, you start barely catching that outside berm, that outside rut, you're just barely keeping that ass end of the bike on the track, you know, that can definitely create a fun little gameplay experience. Definitely don't let me trick you up here. It definitely can, but I think it just may give some people a little bit of a different vibe than what they might have been expecting with Legends Lucas Oil Pro Motocross tracks. So I just thought it was worthy pointing out all that. But at the end of the day, is it worth the money? I mean, it's kind of to that point where it's like, I don't know why you'd buy Legends and then not buy the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross DLC. It's just like, it kind of goes hand in hand with it, and with the fact that Legends was so cheap to begin with on Steam, it's like even more of a reason to make the Pro Motocross DLC worth it. And you get all that other track content with the stock motocross tracks, the trail tracks in the game, free ride, supercross, straight rhythm, all that other different kind of track content that comes in the base version of the game. Now you're basically just, you know, paying a little bit of extra money to stack on more and more track content in the game and just extend the life cycle of the game, basically, and the replayability of the game. That's pretty much what it is at this point, man. But until you're to the point where you've spent as much as like $60 or shit, I think they've even got some of the AAA games in stores for like $69.99, bro. Giggity. Giggity. But that is insane. Like, some PS5 games like $69.99, bro. Holy shit, bro. So the fact that Legends is like 30-something bucks on Steam, you know, it opens up that door to make at least a few of these DLC purchases seem a lot more worth it monetarily. So that's what we come down to at the end of the day, okay? Either way, man. Appreciate you guys watching all the videos. I'll see you boys on that next one. Later, dudes.